this is going to be sound really offensive and horrible, and oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm going to say this. Saying it to you privately is fine. Saying it to the world is a completely other thing.
Okay, how do we start this?
Lana Blakely and Mr. Reagan.
Oh yes, you gave me a good intro. Thank you.
Chris, welcome to my channel.
Thank you.
I want to start with saying that I watched one of your videos where you said that you can tell the story, but you had come home to find that your girlfriend had done your laundry. And that's the moment, or not the moment, but that's when you realized, I want to marry this girl. And then you went on to talk about kind of house chores and how things are divided in the home. So I just want to start there. How do you see, or what are your thoughts in general about house chores and how, gender roles? What should women do and what should men do? And what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I sort of take the Milo Yiannopoulos approach to feminism, which is that feminism is cancer. Have you not heard that? Oh, yeah, it's great. You got to watch Milo. I don't think feminism has been really good for society on the whole. I think that there are some aspects. We talked about this earlier. I think there are some things that feminism has done that have really, really benefited society, but I think that the unintended consequences were such that it has been far, far worse for society than it has done good. I'll give you an example. They just had a study come out, and I saw this on, I think, Tucker Carlson on Fox News, which I know most of your feminist viewers will have watched and love. That's sarcasm. They just had this study produced, which showed that traditional women in America, Christian, church-going, married women with children, were the happiest women in America. Right, I don't know how you judge happiness, but that's, they always do these studies. And I think that plays out in my experience. I think that women who sort of accept, a certain traditional set of values and act in a traditional kind of way do tend to be better off than women who tend to fight that. However, I think, and this is not true just in my own experience, but I've heard Jordan Peterson talk about this, who's a clinical psychologist. He has a lot of patients and stuff. A lot of women who focus exclusively on their career until they're 30 or 35 or 40, and then they realize, what I really want is a family and kids. They look around and they realize, well, I'm 40. I can't have kids anymore, or I'm getting close. And all the guys that I know that are available are dating, 25-year-olds. So, most men who are the kind of men that want to get married and have kids and stuff like that usually have that, in their 20s or at least in their early 30s, or at least by the time they're 40. And the men who don't really want that or aren't really looking for that aren't going to be a suitable husband anyway. And so they're probably the only ones that are going to be single by the time this woman realizes, okay, I did the career thing, I'm happy with my career. So I don't, look, for women who think, I'm probably never going to be married and that kind of stuff, that's not the direction I want my life to go. Yeah, feminism was great, right? They can go and they can become CEOs of companies, and that's wonderful. But for any woman who thinks that maybe at some point in her life she is going to want the traditional thing, she's going to want a husband and kids, it's really not a good idea for her to focus so much on her career. And actually, I think it's worse for society as a whole, because I think it makes things harder for men. And it also makes things harder for couples in general to meet each other. I don't want to hog the mic the whole time, but I kind of want to give it back to you. Yeah, here, just take it.
I just wanted to ask you, so you said it's not good for society as a whole. Well, the first question I have is, why would you think that's the case? And also, you said that it's not good for relationships. And you don't think it's possible for women to balance a career, a successful career, and also a family life? Because there are plenty of women who do that and that are seemingly happy. So why would that not be
why should that not be encouraged and also possible for women?
I do think it's possible, and I think my mom did it, beautifully. She was a dental hygienist. But yeah, if you're in a situation where the husband can work and the wife doesn't have to, and she can stay home with the kids, I don't think that should be, like, I think a lot of people probably heard that and cringed, right? They thought, oh, women stay home and take care of the kids. What is that about? Well, but the truth is, a lot of women really want to do that. But it's difficult for them now, right? We're in a situation where it's very hard for them. They have the opportunity to go work. They're expected to go work. And I think that men just aren't getting paid the same amount as they used to be, because in the old days, there was this expectation, okay, if a guy has a family, then he's probably going to do better. He's going to get more promotions. They're going to treat him a little bit better than if he was a single guy. Because the company knows, okay, well, that guy actually, despite the fact that maybe he's not quite as qualified as the single guy, he's got a family to support. Let's help this guy out. Well, now there is no such concern, because they're like, well, is your wife not working? Like, what's going on with that? Like, why doesn't she work? Right? So there's this kind of cultural expectation now where both parents can work. And so men don't necessarily get the same kind of, and you've also got this idea of the wage gap, and which is complete baloney, by the way. It's not a real thing. There's the idea that women, need to be taken care of more than men in the workplace. Like, women need to get the promotions. Women need to get paid more in order to close this wage gap. We got this societal consciousness that says we need this social justice. So a lot of managers and business owners will actually try to promote this idea by promoting women and paying them more. And, a lot of men are just getting left behind. So, for the family unit, it's a terrible thing. And then also for women who are trying to meet a man and they're very successful, it really limits their pool of men that are available to them. Because a lot of women, and you probably don't agree, and a lot of women will say, hypothetically, they don't agree. But, I've met a lot of women who will say this, and statistically this is shown out to be true. Women will not date men that are less successful to them. It's just not attractive. It's much more attractive to meet a man who makes more money than you, right? And be like, oh yeah, that guy's he's successful, he's attractive, and it's human nature for that. I don't blame women for that. It's not like a gold digger situation. It's more of a safety and security situation. Oh, this guy can take care of me if I need him to. And I think that's great. I think that's how kind of the mentality should be. For the women who make a ton of money and don't care about dating a guy who makes less than them, that's cool too. I mean, that's great. If they can do that, that's great. I just don't think that's typical. I don't think that's typical.
Well, so I do want to say that I think that women, if they would want to stay at home and take care of their families and be stay-at-home mothers, I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I think the main thing is that women should have the choice of wanting to either pursue a career and be successful in that way, or to choose to stay at home with their family. And I don't think there's anything wrong with either situation. Sure.
I don't think they shouldn't have the choice. I don't think we should have the societal pressure that we have now. I think that motherhood to some extent has been demonized. Not motherhood on its own, but specifically the whole stay-at-home mom thing is now considered to be sort of, oh, she's just a stay-at-home mom, right? And I think that for centuries that has been a position of great respect. People have seen, it was kind of expected. Oh, you've got kids and you've got a husband and he goes to work and you stay at home and take care of the kids. And women took a lot of pride in how they maintained their home and how they raised their kids and this sort of thing, and they really focused on that, and that became a huge point of pride for them. And now this is sort of an afterthought. I still think women take pride in how they keep their house and how they take care of their kids. It's no longer the focus of their lives, and so it becomes, okay, you've done that and you've got a career, and so everything becomes a point of pride for them, and their focus is split. I don't know if that's necessarily always a bad thing. I don't think women should just be bored at home. They should be able to do what they want, like you said. Yeah.
So we talked about this a while back, where you said that you think that women should stay home and focus on their man's career instead. So can you talk briefly about that?
Okay, well, I do think that there is a kind of sense of unity when both people are focused on one of the person's, one career or one direction. right? Once they're split, once their attention is split, this person's focused on their career, that person's focused on their career. They're already spending time apart, and then they're at home, and they're thinking about their career, and they're making their phone calls, or they're sending their emails, and they're split even more. If you've got a stay-at-home mom who's taking care of the kids, and she's helping the husband out with his career, I just feel like that somehow unifies them a little bit more. Now, it's kind of a smaller point, but I do think that it's a reasonable one. And in general, I do think that there is a kind of, we're more individualistic in society generally because of the internet. We can be off in our little worlds. We don't have to have real life friends. We can have internet friends. And I think the same thing happens in relationships. And I think these are all little problems that combine to form, a slightly bigger issue. And I mean, it's just technology and the times, and things are going to change. I do think it's unfortunate. I think that the biggest problem I have is less about the problems caused or the divisions caused by technology, because that's inevitable, and rather the problems caused by the social impact of feminism, these ideas about how women should be, that women should be career-oriented instead of family-oriented. And I think that hurts a lot of women without them knowing it. I think that if you have this idea of, I'm an ambitious person, I want to have a great career, like sometimes that's good for some women. And a lot of women think that's good for them. But I think that when it comes down to it, they find that at the end of the day, they really regret having made that choice. And look, I'm not saying that they shouldn't get that choice. I'm just saying, and people don't have the right to make their own mistakes. I mean, I've made plenty. But I think that society should say, if you want to make the choice of having kids and meeting a great guy and, who's going to take care of you, and that's your life plan, that shouldn't be stigmatized. Because even just saying that, I could sense that people watching are like cringing at that idea. Oh, how dare you? Yeah, it's like, no, you shouldn't have a man take care of you. You should take care of yourself. BS. You should. Yeah. I'm not saying that you absolutely need to do that. I'm just saying that idea shouldn't be stigmatized. And the fact that people think that when you talk about it, which I know people do, that is a problem. It's a problem that people think that's a bad thing. Don't tell women that. I think that's awful. I think women should have the choice, and right now they don't. Really, the only choice, if you want to be sort of socially acceptable, is to have a career, and I think that's awful. I think women should have really a real choice, and not be socially stigmatized for wanting to meet a great guy and have him take care of them.
Well, so you say that women should have that choice, and if we talk about men and their side of things, so you say that women find men that are highly successful more attractive, and a man who makes more money than them. So what are your thoughts on men having that choice of wanting to be a stay-at-home parent? What are your thoughts on stay-at-home fathers?
This is a growing phenomenon. I actually remember when this kind of started becoming a thing. It started to become acceptable for a guy to become a stay-at-home dad. And the initial reaction, I think, that most normal people had was not good. Most people, I think, thought, that guy needs to just kind of like sort himself out and go get a job. For thousands of years, since the dawn of time, the concept was women have monthly things. They have pregnancy. They have breastfeeding. Yeah. They have breastfeeding. They have all these kinds of things that that keep them home, that keep them from leaving the cave or whatever it was. And they didn't have all the sort of technological stuff we have now. We didn't have the sanitary stuff they have now, or breast pumps, or any of this stuff. So it was, Sure. They didn't have any of that stuff, so it was harder for them to be able to leave the hut or the cave or wherever they lived. And so the man had to go out. I mean, if the man didn't feel that sense of duty, the woman would probably starve and die, and the kids would probably starve and die. So, yeah, maybe it is an evolutionary thing. And here's the real problem with a man staying home. Because of all that, if we don't go work, if we don't go provide for the family, we feel like failures. It makes us depressed, right? And we have an epidemic of suicide in America amongst men. It's not an epidemic amongst women. It is very specifically amongst men. There is a huge problem with depression. We all know that. Both men and women have that. But, we need to try to figure out what the cause of this is and try to tackle it. And I think part of the cause is this sort of feminization of men, this sort of, oh, you don't have to go work, you can stay home with the kids. No, men need to go out and provide for the family. Men need to feel some sense of purpose, like they're contributing to not only their family, but to the world, that they're doing something good with the world, in the world. And if they don't have that, you are really depriving them of one of their fundamental needs, just like food and shelter and socialization and air. They need to be able to have some sense of purpose, like they're contributing. If you don't give them that, then they are screwed.
One thing I want to talk about is, well, first thing, I think raising children is the most difficult job in the world. I think to me that's very obvious, but also I think the reason why I find it so important to encourage women to pursue a career is, or one of the reasons for that is financial independence. Because I, as a woman, know that I never want to financially depend on any person, whether that's a man or a parent or a friend or whatever it might be. So I think that's one of the fundamental things or reasons for why it's so important to encourage women to, pursue a career and have their own financial stability. If I remember correctly, you said it's better if the woman depends on the man, and that will kind of unify them in the relationship. Yeah. So can you talk a little bit more about your thoughts?
Well, okay, I'll tell you what, I thought about this a little bit after we did that interview, because that was kind of, off the top of my head. Hold on, let me advertise. Is that in the shot? I don't think so. Yeah, exactly. It's a kind of a weird thing, because I would say that, yeah, if the woman depends on the man feels a sense of duty to the woman, and I feel like he's less likely to cheat. Look, you can be, I think, a very strong couple and have the wife work and all that kind of stuff, because you're kind of working toward the same goal, right? And I think that that's really part of what makes a good marriage, is that the two of you are working toward the same goal. And I think one thing that united Valeria and I was that she's always been very supportive and encouraging and tried to help me as much as she could with regard to my YouTube channel. This is going to be sound really offensive and horrible, and oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm going to say this. Saying it to you privately is fine. Saying it to the world is a completely other thing. I don't want to say this. You will after this. No. I think, okay. So I think that, say what? I am going to. So I think that in the old days, you had a certain subset of women who were very, very happy, right? And these women had the best husbands. They were rich. They were really kind men. They were good. They didn't cheat. They were respectful. They loved their wives. You had this small section of women who had just the best lives. Everything was amazing. You had a huge amount of women who were anything from very happy to, somewhat discontent. And they had this small minority of women who were very, very unhappy. And a lot of times these women were stuck in marriages they didn't like. But then a lot of times these women were women who just couldn't find a husband. They were just women who couldn't get married. And a lot of times these are the women, I feel like this sort of marginalized group, the women who couldn't succeed in the traditional system, right? They couldn't succeed in finding a husband who had money and who could take care of them, and they could have kids together and be happy together. These were the women who drove the feminist movement, right? Because they were the ones that needed to get jobs, and not just the secretary job, any job, right? And this is kind of be brutal, but I feel like these, for the most part, were the really terrifically ugly women in society, like physically ugly, right? And maybe they just didn't have a good personality either. I mean, there are just some women who find it really hard to find a husband. And with men, we don't have that problem so much, because if you're an ugly guy, you can maybe get rich and then you can get a great wife or something. I mean, there's other reasons that women look, for a man. But for men, if they're trying to find a wife, the wife usually has to be at least somewhat attractive, both physically and their personality as well. And it's going to be really hard for women who are just, I shouldn't say ugly, I should say undesirable, right? Undesirable, right? Yeah, because it encompasses so much more, right? And that is true.
Because, beauty is defined so differently by different people. So what does ugly even really mean?
Well, that's just a silly point to make.
It's not a silly point to make.
Come on, we all know what we're talking about, right? Some people are just unattractive, physically unattractive. And it's much harder for those women, and it's to this day it's harder. It's always going to be harder. And feminism, like I said earlier to you privately, feminism was wonderful for them because now they had that independence, right? And then for the women who were in oppressive relationships and needed to get out of those relationships, feminism was amazing for them. But so feminism was great for a small minority of women. But feminism was bad for all the women that were very successful at getting husbands and raising kids and all that kind of stuff. So the women who were beautiful or even just like sort of average looking but had good personalities and were charming and kind and could get a wonderful husband and have great kids and have a wonderful life and really focused on that part of their existence and took pride in their household and their kids. For all those women, they no longer could solely focus on that stuff. They had to then go get jobs, and that's the world that we live in now. Which, look, for some women, that's great. But I think for a lot of women, it actually makes their life worse. Women who are desirable enough will always be taken care of, right? They will always have men who are willing to take care of them. And it's just a brutal truth. I mean, it's a kind of messed up reality that some people are just screwed from the time they're born. And this is a discussion that we had earlier, this concept of the blank slate. Are people born with some genetic predispositions toward things, or are people just blank slates and then the environment affects them and they make their own choices? Or is everything genetic and you just don't have a choice and it's all, predestined? I think it's a mix. You think it's more of a blank slate, and you're wrong.
Let's talk about why I'm not wrong.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
No, but I think, we talked about this earlier where we said that I think that for the most part, I don't even know if it's for the most part, but for a big proportion of it is that we as human beings are born, as a blank slate, excuse my English, where we can make a lot of decisions and where our families and our environment and our upbringing really shapes us and affects who we are as human beings. And I think we really do have the power to reshape ourselves. And I think it's actually dangerous to believe that we are born a certain way and that we are born under certain circumstances that we cannot change and that we just need to accept our faith. I think that's dangerous. I think that causes, can cause laziness and a sort of victimhood mentality, which really isn't beneficial for any human being. But you don't think so?
Oh, no. Look, I would say that you're right about maybe like 40%, right? So in the sense that we can choose our own destinies and make our own decisions and we're a product of our environment, is I think something like 40% of us, right? But like 60% of us is just what we used to call genetic. And now we know it's not just genetic. There's also other kind of factors, but we refer to this as genetic, right? So like it's inborn. It's something that we're born with. If I am born 5'2" and not a lot of muscle mass, not a lot of hand-eye coordination, probably not going to be a basketball player. Right, but this extends to other things.
We did talk about ambition, for example, and you said you're born with ambition, and I disagree.
Yeah. No. Well, I do think that to some degree that could be influenced by your circumstances and your family and all this kind of stuff. But this concept of the blank slate, where we can be whatever we want to be, it's simply a matter of our circumstances and our choices. That is a very romantic idea. It's an idea that I'm very attracted to. I would love it if that were true, because then anything that you succeeded in was simply a product of your own efforts. And that would be really fair and just. And that would be great. And any failures that you have are simply a product of not working hard enough, right? But we just don't live in that world. And it's crappy. And nobody likes that the world is not fair. Nobody likes that some people are born in war-torn Africa and other people are born, in beautiful Oregon with like zero problems. Me, or beautiful Sweden, with this lovely culture and the lovely countryside and everything. But that's just the way life is, and you have a huge amount of your Okay, so they did this study about about people's potential, right? This guy had this amateur, a guy had never played tennis before, because there's this idea about 10,000 hours. Have you heard of this idea of 10,000 hours? Okay, Malcolm Gladwell, right, wrote this book, and he had this idea that if you practice anything at 10,000 hours, you'll be an expert. This is total bunk. Okay, this is absolute nonsense. If you have a predisposition toward being good at basketball, your potential is, say, here, right? You're like Michael Jordan. If you have a genetic predisposition against being good at basketball, maybe your potential's here. So if you practice for 10,000 hours, you will reach your top potential. If Michael Jordan practices for 10,000 hours, he'll reach his top potential, right? If Michael Jordan doesn't practice ever, doesn't ever plays the game, his baseline may be even higher than your 10,000 hour expert, at basketball thing. He might still beat you just because he's so naturally gifted that even if he'd never played the game before, he might still win against somebody who'd played 10,000 hours. And look, you're going to get better if you practice correctly. You're going to get better. Okay. So if you have this potential and this guy's got this potential and you practice and he doesn't, you're going to beat him. But you're still not going to beat Michael Jordan. You're still not going to beat up Mike Tyson, no matter how much you box. If you're just smaller and you're less inclined, you don't have the coordination to be a good boxer, you're not going to do it. And it works for intellectual pursuits as well. It's not just for physical stuff. People want to believe that it's only for, okay, we'll give this guy's tall, obviously. But that's only something we can see, right? So, of course, we accept that. But you have to understand that it works for intellectual pursuits as well and creative pursuits. Certain people are just wired certain ways, and they're going to be good leaders. They're going to be good at being president. And this is another reason why it's possible that maybe women are less often inclined to be CEOs or to be the president of the United States or something like that, right? Margaret Thatcher is a controversial leader, but to many, she's considered one of the greatest leaders in history. And she's a woman. And she's a conservative, by the way. And, nobody argues that, some people argue whether she was a great leader or not, but people don't argue about whether or not some perceive her as a great leader. I mean, she's definitely perceived by many people as a great leader. Now, maybe she had a predisposition toward that, but it's possible that that's a rare exception amongst women. It's possible that women are less often predisposed to being great leaders or, wanting to be a leader or having a genetic disposition toward those pursuits. And look, that's not necessarily bad. Maybe it's just that the highest paying jobs, for whatever reason, are jobs in which men are more predisposed toward doing. And I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing, and I don't think it's unfair. And these are all like highly controversial things that I'm saying, and you're probably horribly triggered. But I think that this is possible. I'm not saying this is absolutely true. I'm not saying I believe this. I just think, I would say that I think this is likely. But I'm perfectly willing to accept it as false. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry. I ramble on a little bit.
No, I like it. I think definitely some people are naturally more gifted in certain areas. I don't think there's any arguing that, but I do think when it comes to more of your personality traits, such as accepting yourself as being lazy or unambitious or and using that as an excuse to not pursue whatever it is that you want to pursue, I think in that sense it's dangerous. But of course I think that some people are more artistic or are going to be more successful in sports or any intellectual, whatever it might be. But I do think that you shouldn't just simply accept yourself as being a certain way and then use that as an excuse for why you're not where you do want to be in life. I want to ask you one final question. We still have 2 minutes to go. You talk a lot about confidence, and I want the people watching to have some practical advice on confidence and how to become more confident, because you've talked about that a lot in your videos. So if you could just briefly give some advice to men or women and how to gain confidence if you're simply not a confident person.
I'd like to address the victimization thing as well, because I think that's incredibly important. You're absolutely right. People can victimize themselves in any way. They can say, well, I'm just not born for this or something like that. The problem with addressing the excuse of a genetic predisposition is that oftentimes that's actually true, right? So if I say, well, I'm just not ever going to be a great basketball player, so I might as well just quit trying to be a professional basketball player, that might actually be a good move, right? That might actually be the right move to make, right? So to say, well, I'm just a victim of my circumstances, you might actually be a victim of your circumstances. So I don't necessarily think that it's something that we should demonize. I think it's something we should encourage. And this goes to confidence, and I'll get there in a second. I think the bigger problem is when we demonize other people for our problems, specifically blame other people for our failures, right? That's the bigger problem. I think that happens a lot in the United States with like race, right? We often say, and also with feminism, right? We often say, okay, well, women are, maybe don't make as much money as men because men are sexist. Women, or black people don't make as money as white people because white people are racist, right? We often say that. You often hear that on CNN and this kind of things. You may not hear those words specifically, but that's a lot of times what they're trying to express. But like, how many self-avowed racists have you met since coming to America?
Me personally? For me personally, I can't.
None. Neither have I. And here's the thing. I've been around the country for 39 years, right? I've lived here for 39 years. I lived in England for 1 year.
I mean, I haven't been here for that long, but I definitely have in Sweden.
Right. You told me that. And we can actually get into that. I think that would be fascinating. Maybe you can come on my channel and we'll talk about that. Yeah, why not? Yeah, another one. But if I've been around for 39 years and I've never met a self-avowed racist. I mean, I actually have heard somebody say the N-word before. Once in 39 years. Some black woman drove by in a truck and almost hit me and this other guy, and he blurted out the N-word. And it was actually so bizarre to me. I literally never heard this in real life, just in movies. I laughed, which is probably not the best, response to have. I should have been like, "Whoa, dude," But I laughed because I was so. It seemed like a fiction. It seemed like a fantasy world where racists are still roaming the streets, right? But other than that guy, I've never encountered anyone who I thought was racist or who had expressed that they were racist. Oh, except for immigrants. Immigrants from, especially Middle Eastern countries and stuff like that, in Eastern Europe, who drive Uber. For some reason, those people are horribly racist. But not Americans. Now, you would think that, naturally born American, people born in America. But you'd think that after 39 years, if I'm a white guy, and I'm primarily meeting other white guys, I mean, I have friends of all races, but you'd think that they would feel a little bit more comfortable around me saying something racist about, say, black people than they would around black people, right? They would, if they were, if there's this concept of secret racism. But we're constantly told that white people are secretly racist, right? There's a secret cabal of racists in America trying to keep down the other groups. Now, if that was true, I think I would know about it. I think I would have met some of these people. But I haven't. And I think that this is unbelievably detrimental to the communities that are told, you are oppressed because of these other people. Because you have one group, say women, and you tell them all of your failures are not your fault. Every time that you have fallen short, it's because men oppress you. That, to me, is a far, far more detrimental thing than just examining yourself and thinking, maybe I'm actually not the best basketball player. Because I think that's actually a good thing. So it can be a bad thing. I mean, it can be a bad thing if you are, in fact, a magnificent basketball player and you're just being down on yourself. And this also falls into confidence, which I'll get into in a second. But I think that blaming an external, an external force or an external group or some other person for your failures is a far more detrimental, to your life path than recognizing your own failings. I think recognizing your own failings is incredibly valuable. But at the same time, you have to recognize your value. So this is my definition sort of being a confident person. And this will make you very attractive, by the way, to both men and women. Women can become intimidating, actually, because we're in a society...
If they're too confident?
Yeah, because we live in a society in which men have been so denigrated that a lot of men are kind of what we would call beta males, right? They're the sort of men that sort of like, oh, whatever you want, very weak, low confidence, low self-esteem. Horrible side effect of feminism, I think. In this weird society that we live in which men can be sort of, whatever.
Can I just jump in really quick? Sorry. Do you think that is the pressure from feminism, or do you think it's just allowed men to actually be however they want to be? Which is, I think, a good thing. If that's, I don't think all men want to be this tough, dominant man. I'm sure a lot of men do. But I think there are also men who just, want to be more laid back and want to express their feminine side more, and that should be accepted.
No, it absolutely should not be accepted. I think we've always had weak, effeminate men. They've always existed. And to some extent, I think different cultures have been more accepting of these guys or less accepting of these guys. I don't think they should be bullied. I think bullying is a bad thing. Generally, I think bullying is a bad thing. But I do think there should be some social pressure toward some degree of toughness in men, right? In general. Now, there are some women who really like the sensitive, kind of like weak guy. But for the most part, most women want a guy who, if they're walking down the street and some, street toughs attack them, that the guy will stand up and fight for his woman. The guy who will push her in front of the guys and then run away so that he is then protected is probably not the most attractive guy to most women, right? And to some extent, I think men should be discouraged from being, for lack of a better term, I think men, yeah, really, you can bleep that. Really, men, it's a kind of a brutal way of expressing it, but I do think that there is a tendency, if you give some men, you remove any kind of social stigma and you say, no, it's totally accepted to be weak and pathetic. A lot of men will go, all right, I'm going to do that because it's a little bit easier, right, for them. Look, a lot of things in life are tough. We add social pressure to everyone for all kinds of things. Sometimes it's actually for the best. It'll make them a better person. It'll make them more attractive. It'll give them a better life if they're a little bit tough. But I think that the primary way to really develop confidence is to accept your flaws, your failings, and also to accept your value. If you just do one or just do the other, you're not gonna be a balanced person. What is it? Logo.
Yes.
Logo. You need. What's that?
The logamist movement.
Is the movement?
We're the logamists.
Our movement. We started a movement. Yeah, we started a movement. Kind of. It hasn't taken off yet, but we'll get it. We'll get it going. The logamists, which is just people who are measured, balanced, and if you are able to say, okay, look, I'm not good at basketball, but I'm a pretty good artist, and you just accept that value. Look, I'm never going to be the best basketball player, but maybe I could be the best artist, or maybe I could be the best writer, or maybe I could be the best journalist, or maybe I'm not that good at smart people stuff, but dang, I'm a good baseball player. I could be a professional baseball player. Or even if you're not the best at anything, but you're pretty darn good at anything, any one thing. Just take your value. I'm not very smart. I'm not very athletic, but dang, I'm handsome. I will be a fantastic model, right? Focus on that and also recognize your failings so that you can develop some skill or some knowledge or some ability to better yourself, right? Or better yourself in some way. Because you have to recognize your failings in order to better yourself in those areas. If you just say, oh, no, I'm not bad at anything, you're never going to really be able to bring yourself up in those areas where you're failing. And if you just focus on the failings, you just, oh, I'm crap at everything, then you're never going to be able to exploit the values that you already have. So recognizing the fact that you sort of got these inborn characteristics, and that, also the environment helps, and your work ethic and all the things that you've done in your life to better yourself already, recognizing where you've succeeded or where you have value, and recognizing the places that you fail, that will allow you, that's the only real way to then become confident. And that doesn't guarantee that you'll be confident, but it at least facilitates confidence. If you don't have that self-awareness, you're never going to be able to develop any kind of confidence, because you're never going to be able to sort yourself out or recognize that you already have value. So that's sort of my definition of confidence, is sort of a realistic self-awareness. Realistic self-awareness.
I think that's absolutely great advice. I think I agree with everything. I think I agree with everything you said there. At the end, I think that's great. I hope people apply that to their lives. Recognizing your flaws and your weaknesses and focusing on your strengths. I think it's very important. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
I'm trying to think of something funny.
Yeah, can we have...
Yeah. Try not to be ugly. Really, it's true. The uglier people in the world. I was telling you about this. I used to work as a valet, right? And in LA, where I used to work, valets are all Mexicans and black guys. I mean, it's very rare that it's a white guy working. There was a couple of white guys that worked with me, but mainly it was black guys at my particular place. And we used to talk about racism and race stuff all the time, right? We were all good friends. It was all positive, It wasn't like we were in a fist fight or anything like that. We used to talk about this stuff just intellectually. What racism have you experienced? Is it a big deal? Stuff like that. And at one point, I saw somebody across the street who was particularly unattractive. And I turned to these guys and I said, you know what, guys? We can argue all day about how much racism there is in America, all this kind of stuff. At the end of the day, the people who are the most bigoted against, the race that has the hardest time of all, are the uglies. And they all just started... A couple of them laughed, but mostly they all just went, yep, that's right. Yeah. And we all kind of agreed. Like, it doesn't matter what color you are. It doesn't matter what your gender is. It doesn't matter what your sexual orientation is. If you're a good-looking person, people are, for the most part, going to either respect you or they're going to envy you, right? They're either going to want to be you, or they're going to resent you, or they're going to respect you. One of those things. If you are a deeply unattractive person, either physically or your personality or whatever, if you're undesirable, you're just screwed. Like, you got to develop some sense of personality, and you got to work your butt off, because you're at a huge disadvantage. And that to me is the most brutal truth of our current society, and it's something we don't really talk about. But ugly people have it pretty bad, and women have it worse than men. Men can kind of get by if you're kind of look at Harvey Weinstein. He did great, but women, it's hard. It's really hard for people who are like really, really unattractive, and that's a tough truth. I don't know why I wanted to end with that, but
It was supposed to be funny. It was just horrible.
It was just horrible. It was a horrible thing to say.
No, I do think that's a horrible thing to say.
It's true though. It's true. It's a brutal reality. You can cut that part out if you want. It doesn't need to be in there. I don't know why I went on that tangent. That's so weird. That was weird. The clouds look nice, don't they?
Great.
Yeah. Sometimes we have just blue sky in Los Angeles. It's so boring. This is amazing.
You're right.
Yeah.
That's actually true.
Yeah, because you lived here first.
Yeah, I lived here for a bit. Well, great.
And on that bombshell.
All right.
This is how I wanted to get. It's hysterical.
Yep. Thank you so much
Thank you.
for being on my YouTube channel.
Thank you for.
It was a great, interesting conversation. Please leave your thoughts in the comments section. What do you agree with? What do you disagree with? Keep it civil as always, but we would love to read about your opinion. No, I don't have a Patreon.
Okay, she's going to set up a Patreon before uploading this channel. I'm going to make her subscribe to her Patreon. Give her $1. She needs this to be her career. She's great.
Should I start a Patreon?
Yeah, you should start a Patreon so you can support yourself just doing this. Because
Really?
you got a good personality, I mean, and you got interesting ideas.
Oh, thank you.
So it's good. I think that her channel. I've always wanted to support her channel. The way that I found her, this is kind of a funny thing. Well, you found me actually. You found my. Yeah, she found my channel because I'm a famous YouTuber. Kind of.
Well, at the time, you had about, I think, not even 30K
Oh yeah. Really?
when I found you.
Yeah. So she found my channel and or fairly early on. Because I was a Jordan Peterson. I used to do a lot of Jordan Peterson. That was my initial audience, Jordan Peterson fans. And what I noticed is that in my comment section, there was this one person who would comment and get like 10,000 responses. And I was like, who is this? Is this like a famous YouTuber? And so I clicked on her profile and she had like 17 followers. It was really weird. It was bizarre. But six. She had a few hundred. Okay, whatever. Anyway, it was very limited. And I thought, why is this girl getting so many responses to my comments? I was like, okay, it's because she's hot. That's the reason. She's a beautiful girl. People see the little icon of the beautiful girl, and then they just comment. But I thought, let me watch a couple of her videos and, see if she's, what she has to say. And some fascinating ideas. The original reason why I wanted to talk to you is because she said, I'm a feminist, but I'm a big Jordan Peterson fan. And I thought, well, this is not right. And so I thought, well, that's an interesting perspective. We did a video together on my channel and stuff like that. Yeah, go ahead and check out that video. But yeah, so I think that she's got a unique perspective. I think that you're young. You're 22, 24. What happened?
You said 22 in your video, and I'm 24.
Why didn't you correct me? Sorry, I thought she was 22. So she's 24. So she's still young enough where you've got a lot of experiences ahead. Your perspective will probably change to some degree, and I find her particular perspective fascinating. I'm constantly trying to convince her that I'm right about everything. Hopefully it'll happen one day. But yeah, I think that growth is interesting, and I think that she's the kind of person who is an interesting person for you to follow, listen to, and maybe try to influence in the comment section. But definitely join her Patreon and support her channel, which she will have. I'll force her to get one because I think she's a valuable voice. I think we need as many interesting perspectives as we can get on YouTube, specifically on YouTube, but just on the internet in society generally, so that we do have the best ideas out there. And I think that you will be an interesting voice going forward. So join her Patreon.
Wow, that was really kind of you. I really appreciate those words. Thank you. And I really appreciate this conversation. And don't forget to check out his channel, Mr. Reagan. Subscribe, like his content, leave nice comments. It's very interesting. Whether either side, whatever side you're on politically, as he said, I think it's always important and interesting to listen to other people's perspectives. So do that, and thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.
And I apologize for rambling. Hopefully she cuts this down a little bit.
We'll see. All right, bye.
Bye-bye.
Great.
I think that was great.
That was awesome.
11:58, is that okay?
Yeah, I need to
You're
leave
gonna make
in
it back to wherever you're going?
Yeah, I'm going to the Ellen show.
Hey,
Yeah,
that's
very
cool. You're gonna
excited.
get free stuff.
Oh, maybe. We'll see. Hopefully. A car?
A car. I don't know if it's gonna be a car, but the Ellen show
This is
should be
awesome.
fun.